you. And next speaker is Marta Bernabéu, who holds a PhD in Advanced English Studies, Languages and Cultures in Contact from the University of Salamanca, where she's currently a lecturer in Literatures and Cultures in English at the Department of English Studies. Her research interests range from affect, gender and adaptation studies to Victorian and Neo-Victorian and contemporary British literature.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your introduction, and thank you very much to the organizers for this marvelous conference. I'm always really pleased to be here, and especially with such wonderful friends as well. And thank you, Laura, for giving me the opportunity to delve deeper into theatre and expand or extend my research into theatre. I'm getting the hang of it. I really liked researching about adaptations of Jane Eyre. Obviously, it's not my field of expertise, if I have any. I work on Neo-Victorian novels, specifically the Brontes. So I've taken some of my previous work on that, and I try to analyze some of the representations of Bertha Mason in Sally Cookson's and Teale's Jane Eyre. Also, a couple of days ago, a wooden window shutter fell over my head. So I'm okay, I think, but so please bear with me if I have trouble articulating something today. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I'm clicking, but the mouse. Oh, okay, the mouse, yes. And that's it. Okay, thank you. So contemporary adaptations against the double reading that can be established between then, in the case of the Victorian period, and now, as well as how cultural meaning shifts in response to historical and sociocultural change. In this sense, the Brontes novels have provided loci for the apparition and discussion of these new meanings through the openness that the fiction presents. Many of these afterlives, as Hilasa highlights with the title of her 2012 follow-up study to Patsy Stoneman's Bronte transformations, are cultural afterlives, meaning that they function as vessels of cultural concerns. This fact is particularly true of rewritings and adaptations in general, which are often appropriated by certain agendas as well. In this context, the field of Neo-Victorianism emerges as a potential space to revisit and revision the source text and their offspring, along with our own contemporary concerns, which are usually present in these rewritten or adapted postmodern creations. So just a quick summary of what Neo-Victorianism is. The term Neo-Victorianism, first coined by Dana Schiller in 1997, includes works that revise specific Victorian precursors, texts that imagine new adventures for familiar Victorian characters, and new Victorian fictions that imitate 19th century conventions. Anne Harmon and Mark Luling, in their foundational work Neo-Victorianism, the Victorians in the 21st century, emphasize that these texts are engaged in acts of reinterpretation, rediscovery, and revision concerning the Victorians. So thus, Neo-Victorianism is deeply concerned with the reworking, reimagining of Victorian stories, and also it serves as a mode of engaging with them from a more contemporary perspective. So also Neo-Victorianism, we often go back to Gilbert and Guivar's idea of Bertha Mason as Jane's darkest double. And this idea serves the Neo-Victorian project in its quest to, and I'm quoting Rosario Arias and Patricia Pullum here, in its quest to open a channel of communication between the spirits of the past so that we continue to listen what the Victorian ghost has to say. In this sense, Jessica Cox remarks that although the origins of this genre have been widely discussed, various critics locate in 1960s as the starting point, citing works such as Jean Rhys Weiss Agassiz C and John Fowles, the French lieutenant's woman, as early examples of this postmodern field of study. And I think it's quite interesting the fact that Jean Rhys Weiss Agassiz C marks the start of the genre, or at least one of its initial peaks. Because this definitely calls attention to the existence of a Brontean tradition written beyond the Bronte's novels, but also linked or intertwined with the rising of Neo-Victorianism. So I want to talk a little bit more about Weiss Agaziz's influence in Neo-Victorianism, but also in this stage adaptations of Jane Eyre, which are clearly Neo-Victorian in their turn to Rhys's text. So Weiss Agassiz famously tells the story of Antoinette Causeway, later Mason through her modest marriage, and eventually Rochester. Creole heiress in 1830s Jamaica. The novel, as we all know, I guess, covers a marriage to Rochester as well as their courtship before, alternating narrators in order to portray how the later violently assigns her a new identity as Bertha Mason. So Rhys's novel introduces major changes in its narratology in regards to Jane Eyre, presenting a first-person narration of both Antoinette and young Rochester among fragmentary narrations of other characters. But most wonderfully perhaps, Weiss Agassiz gives voice to the voiceless Bertha Mason that looms in Rochester's attic in Jane Eyre. And it also reorients our attention to the Brontean body and its disruption in Bronte's text from a gender and post-colonial perspective. Yes. So actually, Antoinette's journey is one of denaturalization. She's forced to leave her beloved home and surroundings, even her family. But not only that, Antoinette endures the psychological damage of having Rochester constantly uproar her and her surroundings in his attempt to reject the exoticism he sees in them and in himself for initially falling in love with them. Antoinette's body is in fact characterized by its hybridity. She's a Creole of English descent, neither belonging to one place or the other, which has long been recognized as a foundation of Caribbean experience and identities. In fact, the descriptions of colonial Jamaica in the novel, chiefly conveyed through Rochester's point of view, dwell on the wild and alien nature of the surroundings, a strangeness that serves as a prelude to Antoinette's conflicted identity and the pain of being progressively othered by Rochester in particular. So in the Insane Creole, Cox puts forward that Teale's stage play Jane Eyre is one of a number of creative responses which draws on the notion of Bertha and Jane as doubles, echoing again Gilbert and Goubard's analysis of Jane Eyre's Madwoman in the Attic. So Teale writes that central to her adaptation is the idea that hidden inside the sensible frozen Jane exists another self who is passionate and sensual, and that Bertha, trapped in the attic, embodies the fire and longing which Jane must lock away in order to survive in Victorian England. So I haven't seen the play. I haven't had access to Teale's play online or elsewhere, but I have read the play. I have the book of the play. So following these ideas, Teale's 1997 theatrical adaptations of Bronte's novel introduces Bertha on stage as Jane's constant companion to symbolize the struggle between the inner and the outer self for control. And Teale also raises the following question in her words: could it be that Jane and the Madwoman are not in fact opposites? that's like all the most frightening ghosts, Bertha Mason, exist not only in the real world, but in Jane's imagination. And in fact, well, we have this in the stage directions, we have the character of Bertha, as you can see there in the character section. We have Jane and we have Bertha, and she's an actual character in the play. And the others cannot see her, but Jane obviously does, and they have conversations, right? And in this sense, we can see how this the Antoinette's hybridity in Wiser Guys Will See is also translated onto Polly Teale's both Bertha Mason and Jane Eyre. And in the case of Jane Eyre, obviously, social hybridity also comes from the fact that she's a working class orphan woman and an outsider in the space that she populates during the story. So Antoinette's connection to Bronte's character is made on the basis of this hybridity, and further emphasized by how the play presents Bertha's anger at the mistreatment that they both suffer. Bertha, in a way, as a vessel of also Jane's anger, and how she tries to express all this mistreatment that she suffers. And as I was saying, in the play, it says that John, Jane's cousin, addresses Jane as if Bertha were invisible, because in fact, it is, as I was saying, only visible to Jane, but it's a vehicle for her to express anger and frustration, right? As it says here as well from the play, Jane and Bertha lunge at John, biting his shoulder in a fit of violent rage. And also, it's a way for Jane to say how unjust her treatment has been. And in here we have these words that Bertha says, unjust, unjust. But later on in the play, Jane is going to repeat the same ideas in these very same words. So in a way, we clearly see that they're in communion or in dialogue and are even the same person. So this is one of the photographs that I've been able to retrieve from the internet about the staging of Polly Teale's play. And we, in fact, see how these are two separate characters. And it is quite, if you remember, the actress that plays Bertha Mason is wearing like a kind of orangey, reddish dress. If you remember that, I'll talk a little bit more about this and the significance of the red color later on, and when I discuss Sally Cookson's play. So if you can remember that, that would be lovely. So clearly, Polly Teale's play is going all the time around this idea of how Bertha Mason is as if Jane is released. And we can see that in different parts of the play. You have there on the right hand side one of the instances in which Bertha is seen carrying a flame, and it coincides in time when Jane is feeling her first emotions regarding Rochester and these passions that are trying to again be liberated somehow, that they've been kind of repressed during her time at Lockwood, and how this process is ignited, physically ignited by Bertha Mason, and also how Jane's passions are metaphorically ignited, right? And in this sense, Teale also says that it is significant that Bertha is a foreigner. She comes from the land of Bronte's imagination, from a land of hot rain and hurricanes. She's both dangerous and exciting. She's passionate and sexual. She's angry and violent. She's the embodiment of everything that Jane, a Victorian woman, must never be. She's perhaps everything that Bronte feared in herself and longed to express. So in here, we also had this problematic of doubleness and the resort to the wildness, how she is constructing, in a way, Bertha as a vehicle for Jane's liberation and passion, but then it can also, if that's read from a post-colonial perspective, that's problematic in the sense that we also are, in a way, recurring to this stereotypes of the wild and the savage, but it could also be done to reappropriate these ideas and do an effective rewording of these two women. So this is a question up for debate as well. As we see again in scene 36, we see this how Jane stares with horror at the creature in front of her, recognizing her instantly as the self that she left long ago locked in the red room. She looks away and hides her eyes. Bertha snaps and snarls, again, really with a lot of animalistic connotations, right? And in Wise the Guys at Sea, we have also Bertha Mason referring to herself in the mirror and claiming, it was then that I saw her, the ghost, the woman with steaming hair. So it's clearly informed and inspired by these realizations in Wise the Guys at Sea, as well as by all these discourses on the wild and this rewilding again of Jane Eyre, which in some cases could be problematic as well. So, yeah. And also, I think it's significant how Teale tell us how Bertha is dressed at the beginning of the play, and then how she progressively again is kind of her hair is a growing mane and is disheveled, and her clothes are beginning to be torn and dirty. How this progressive animalization can be also spotted, and we can also debate how problematic that is. But significantly towards the end of the play, we also see how Jane reunites with this downtrodden Bertha Mason, and it's in communion with her. It's finally reunited, and they're the same person, and it's a sort of, they bring a sort of sense of peace and communion with their emotions and passions. And it could be also interpreted as a way to cross boundaries with this reunion. In fact, in this note, in this screen directions, it says, Bertha touches her gently, meaning Jane Eyre. In returning to Thornfield and following her own desires, Jane can reunite with her secret self. So again, it's a way to stay true to her passions, however wild and however problematic they might be. And then if we turn to Sally Cookson's Jane Eyre, which was first performed at Bristol Old Vic in 2014, before being performed in the National Theatre in September 2015. We can also see how Wise the Guys at Sea again has an influence on this adaptation, this rewriting, on-stage rewriting of Jane Eyre. I've watched this, I've read the booklet as well, and I've watched the performance, because during the pandemic in 2020, it was streamed on YouTube, so it was available for everyone to watch. And in this adaptation, we have a different conceptualization of the relationship between Bertha Mason and Jane Eyre. Bertha Mason, she's also pretty much a voice that sings during the play, and it's placed, the actress that plays Bertha Mason is placed onto a platform and is almost always present on stage, singing with an ensemble and participating that way, having a voice and singing that voice in a way that echoes Jane's emotions and Jane's experience, but also has a distinctive tone to it. It's also its own voice and its own person, in a way, we could say. And there's an instance here of when Bertha Mason sings a little bit of one of these songs, and then strikes a match. So this is actress Melanie Marshall in Sally Cookson's Jane Eyre from 2015 at the National Theatre, and she's wearing this red dress during the whole performance. And I thought it was quite significant because the red colour appears in Jane Eyre quite consistently as well. From the Red Room, the colour crimson again appears once and once again to symbolise all these passions and all these entrapments and all these limits, and how to Jane somehow breaks away with these limits. So it is significant how this colour also has a major role in White Agathos C. In fact, in part 3 of Reese's text, Antoinette, now turned Bertha Mason, reflects on her entrapment while inquiring from Grace Poole about her situation. As she's disoriented and secluded in Thornfield Hall's attic. In one of these instances, she inquires after her red dress, asking Poole, "Have you hidden my red dress too? If I'd been wearing that, he'd have known me." So Antoinette's red dress is used to interrogate and refute in English cultural norms and to articulate her contradictory desires, as well as her subjectivity, visceral longings, daydreams, and fantasies. What is more, Antoinette's red dress stands as a symbol of her lost home and origins in the Caribbean, as well as her diasporic presence. And finally, I only have 2 minutes left, so I would love to delve deeper into the many meanings of this colour in both Jane Eyre and White Agathos C. But I would like to end up with this idea that the colour red in general symbolises Antoinette's anger at her entrapment, and more so when she comes to realise the injustices that she has and continues to endure, propelling her to act upon these injustices, she says. But I looked at the dress on the floor, and it was as if the fire had spread across the room. It was beautiful and reminded me of something I must do. I will remember, I thought. I will remember quite soon now. So Joanna maintains that Ruth uses the question about the red dress in the post-colonial revisioning of Jane Eyre to emphasize the resemblances between two sensitive, articulate women, Jane and Antoinette, both of whom are lied to and mistreated by their respective masters. Furthermore, she adds that whereas the colour red is associated for Jane Eyre from the very start of the novel with the childhood terrors of the Red Room, etc., Antoinette had chosen to make the colour red her own, associating this with a name and the first person pronoun. And I think that's what Sally Cookson's adaptation does on stage too. We associate this colour again with Bertha Mason, but in its own personal or specific way. It is no longer just Jane's double, but appears as a more independent entity, though we also get this doubleness as well. So be that as it may, I believe that in identifying herself with a ghost and simultaneously clinging onto the red dress and White Agathos C, Antoinette renders visible the patriarchal narratives of control and dispossession that write her as a ghost and a madwoman, but also stands in communion with the very desires that these narratives use to justify control over her body and agency, which I believe both plays, but especially perhaps Sally Cookson's one, succeed in portraying. Similarly, in the stage adaptations of Jane Eyre is directly associated or identified with Bertha Mason, thus again metaphorically embodying Bertha Mason's red dress, as well as reappropriating the colour red and its performative connotations. So because through not only wearing the red dress in these performances, but also acting on these feelings of anger or these passions. And I would like to quote here Sarah Ahmed's concept of the killjoy, embodying this killjoy through the colour red. we also get a new sense and new meanings to what it means to be Bertha Mason throughout gender and post-colonial lens, and what we can say about that now in our contemporary world, or how we interpret it now. So just to raise some further questions for the audience, I would like to say that this presentation has kind of made me reflect on the role of theatre in this Neo-Victorian revision of Bertha Mason, how not only it is influenced by Neo-Victorianism and why is the guy who's he, but how it contributes to this performativity of this performativity of certain affects or certain emotions that tell us a lot about how we interpret not only Jane Eyre, but also our Neo-Victorian apprehensions of Jane Eyre. And then I would like to also raise the question of what do you make of Teale's and Sally Cookson's revision of Bertha Mason, how they might be dissimilar, and what do you think they can still tell us today? So that's everything from me. Thank you very much.